Hey guys, welcome back to another 3D printing video, and today we're going to be checking out a pretty interesting printer made by Lotmaxx, and it's called the SC-10 SHARK. And the interesting part about this one is that it is multifunctional somewhat. So in this video we're going to unbox it, set it up, and do some prints. Hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Let's get started. Alright guys, so this is a Lotmaxx printer, and I've done a review of one of their printers, which was a resin printer, and that seemed like a pretty solid machine. So they're not well too known, but they seem to have pretty good quality product. So we do have a picture here of what the printer looks like, and we can see there's two spools, so there must be dual printing. So that's quite interesting. Their slogan, lots of ideas, maximum creation. And we can see the dimensions of the box in centimeters. And the shipping label does say 10.5 kilograms, which is about 22 pounds or so. Let's go ahead and open up the box. So here on the top, we can see that they are using the soft black foam. And this is what we're greeted with as we open it. So everything is nicely laid out. There's some boxes here. I see a couple spools of filament. Let's go ahead and pull those out. So we got 200 grams of two colors, a green and an orange looks like. Very cool, and they are on their own spools. We got a toolkit box, and we'll go through this in a second. Another box that says bicolor printing kit, and a smaller box that says laser engraving kit. This printer does come with a laser option. And over here looks like there's some kind of brackets. Well, actually it's a bracket with a screen and also a wire that looks like connects to it. So it's like a tethered controller. All right, so that's the first layer, and this printer is packed very well. Lots of protection here and very well organized. All right, so below that, we got a couple planks here of wood, and this is to use the laser on, I guess, for testing. And so here now we get to the 3D printer itself, and it does look like it's in a couple parts. So yeah, it is tethered to the base, and we'll need to come out together, so. All right guys, well that looks like pretty much everything. I don't see anything else. So yeah, very well packed. Let's get this box out of the way. And we'll put the printer on the table here. And so it does appear to be, for the most part, pre-assembled, and we just got to connect these two main pieces together. So I haven't even got a chance to glance at it, and here looking at it for the first time, the first thing that really impresses me is this metallic, kind of like a gunmetal finish that it has. Very nice. It's definitely different than what I've seen before, and there's a lot of nice details going on with this thing. So we're gonna get to that in a second. Let's go ahead and look inside these boxes and see what we got here. So this one is the laser engraver. So it looks like it comes with the laser itself, and it looks like a diode laser with an adjustable beam on the bottom here. There's also a little end stop switch and a little fan on top of that to cool it off with a pretty large heatsink. It doesn't say the wattage on it anywhere here, but I'm going to pop it up here on the screen. And the box itself has some electrical pins here that connect to the printer to operate the laser. And also it does come with some little clips and some hardware to mount it. All right, well that's pretty cool. We're definitely going to have to try that out. So the next box we got here says bicolor printing kit. So this is quite interesting. So it looks like we have a whole separate extruder kit that you assemble onto the printer or add on to it to give it capabilities of being a dual extruder and printing a dual color. So it comes with a couple of PTFE tubings, some interconnecting wires, the extruder mechanism itself with a filament detector on it, the stepper motor, and by the way guys, all of this is metal. very nice high quality materials. And not only that, this is a dual gear extruder. So this is a more of a higher end kind of setup. And what's interesting is there's two of them that are just like this for each of the extruder. So in the box, we also have a few extra couplers and some nozzles. And also we get a spool holder with the bracket for holding the spool. So yeah, this is our dual color kit. And our last box is the tool kit. So here it looks like we have all of our tools and other hardware that we'll need. Our AC power cord, some safety goggles for the laser, and these are in red. A USB cable to connect from the printer to the computer. A spool holder that has the Lotmaxx branding on there. Sharpened spatula, some pretty nice high quality snippers, and some zip ties. In the bag where all the tools and stuff is, quite a few things here. So this appears to be extra parts, an in-stop switch, and it looks like some kind of temperature sensor. A Phillips screwdriver, but it also flips around to be the nozzle replacement wrench. That makes it easy to unscrew the nozzle from the heat block. More tools, we got Allen wrenches, an open-ended wrench, 10 and an 8mm, and a little screwdriver. A micro SD card USB adapter, and the card's already in it, which is a 16 gig. So that's nice and larger than usual. Also, we get a clean out needle with some quality control papers. And for the last part is our bolts. So these longer ones that you see are actually what's gonna connect the gantry to the base. So it's pretty obvious there, but unfortunately, I don't see any kind of instructions that came with any of this, which is fine because they're probably on this SD card. But I would have loved it if they included a quick assembly piece of paper for a quick setup. But it's actually quite simple. I mean, there's only a few things that we have to connect. So we have the display, and then we got to just connect the gantry. So that shouldn't be a big deal at all. All right, so for the next part, I got the printer flipped around and it's sitting on the bed upside down. And what I want to do is I want to open up these covers here so we can see the electronics inside. So it is just Phillips screws all around, and there's two covers. Let's see if it's possible to open them up and see what we got. All right, so I got all the bolts unscrewed. Let's go ahead and pop this first one. So that looks like where our power supply is, and we'll pop our second one. And that's where the rest of the electronics are. All right, so let's take a closer look here. So let's start with the power supply. So the great part is it's a Meanwell power supply, and it's that slim one, so it's a high quality, and it is a 350 watt 24 volt. You can see all the connections are very nicely crimped and routed. This is our AC power plug here, and it is fused. We got an opening here through this channel where all of our cables run out, and then another opening here where they go into this other area. This is our power switch, the on and off on that side. This is the interface connection here on the front of the printer. Laser, the dual color, and the auto bed leveling components plug in. And on our model here, it doesn't look like we have the auto bed leveling option because there's nothing here. We got a pretty large blower here that blows on the main board, and you guys can see how everything is very nicely routed here with the wiring. I'm pretty impressed with that. They definitely took their time and made a very clean assembly here with this printer. So we do have a 24-bit ARM processor. You guys can see our stepper drivers are all removable, and they're also on every axis, which is quite impressive because they are the 2208. And so overall, very well laid out here. It definitely feels like a lot of attention to detail has went into this thing. And also we do have 4 squishy rubber feet on each corner. Also, I want to mention how they used these plastic parts in between the metal frame to enclose everything. It's a really nice design and looks clean and conceals everything. And also the color combination is just awesome between the gray and the gunmetal. All right, so I'm going to put these covers back on and we'll start with the assembly. And while we're under here, guys, I want to mention that you want to check your bolts here, especially these in the center here. There's 4 bolts and they actually hold the y-axis rail, and you want to make sure these are tight. And as you can see, that mine are not all the way tight because they do loosen up after they're tightened. So it's always a good idea to tighten up all the frame bolts around the printer. And there are some more here on the side that we do need to tighten, but not yet. And the reason for that is because we want to set it back on its feet first and make sure you're on a very level table. If your printer, has a little bit of back and forth motion somewhere, you want to loosen all these bolts on the side. There's 4 on each side, and let it sit flat. But again, make sure you're, on a flat surface, and then retighten them again. So mine looks to be very nice and flat. So I'm just going to go ahead and snug them up just to make sure that they will hold this position. Okay, so one of my bolts is very loose, actually 2 of them. And we'll do the same thing on this side. All right, well, that's not very hard, and it ensures that, you know, you're gonna have a pretty solid base to go off of. So let's grab the little bolts that came with the printer. Well, I guess not the little ones, but the longer ones. And there should be 4 total, which there are. It looks like there might be an extra one. But they simply go from the bottom up right there and then into the gantry. So let's go ahead and set our gantry on top here. And so there's no real easy way to do this. I mean, you can go kind of off the edge of the table or something, but normally just tilting it over like this and starting it by hand works pretty well. And that's what I'm gonna do. Got one, let's do the other. All right, so I got this side started. Now we'll go to the other side and do the same thing. So we can go ahead and tighten this, but I like to run the gantry all the way down. And that way, you know, we have the correct separation between the 2 channels here on the Z-axis. And that just ensures that, you know, we're more closer where we need to be before we tighten this. So yeah, so we'll go ahead and snug it up reasonably tight. And now we're at the other side. So yeah, simple as that. Our gantry is connected. And that's pretty much the main part of the assembly with this printer, is connecting the upper portion to the bottom portion. Now there is more things we need to do. Go ahead and raise this back up a bit. And one of them are installing the bracket for the screen. It looks like it goes right here. So there's a couple bolts that go into the channel, and they are in the same bag with the 2 smaller silver ones. So yeah, now I'm just gonna line it up, snug them up, and we got our bracket. So it looks like our screen would just sit right here, and you don't have to, you know, take it off every time. You can just live here, obviously. And we can go ahead and plug our connection in into the port here on the printer. So yeah guys, you see that there's nothing really too complicated. Everything is pretty much pre-built. Now we do still have the spool holder we need to install. And so the spool holder goes here on the top. Let's go ahead and install this piece. It just simply goes through the hole like this, and the nut goes on the other end. We can just turn this part to lock it in. So we do have a couple T-nuts, and the way the T-nuts work is they go inside the channel and then they turn like this and lock in. And so in order for it to work, and by the way, there are a couple holes here through the top where you can get down to the bolt. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna line it up in there. And so you're gonna unscrew it so the T-nut can drop into the channel, and then start tightening it again, and it should turn and lock in, and sure enough, it did. Same thing for this one. You're gonna unscrew it and then tighten it back up. And as long as it's, you know, centered pretty well, it should turn and lock in. And that's it. And the spool holder's on. Well guys, I just realized that this part here is not correct. It's supposed to go the other way. And the reason for that is because the spool sits on the back side of the printer. And that way it can feed down into the extruder, or the detector here than in the extruder. So yeah, the spool part pointing to the back. All right, so we do have a few more things to do here. I guess let's go ahead and plug in the wiring. So we can see here that there's a couple wires that need to be plugged in into the gantry parts, which is this Z-axis in-stop switch and the motor. So the motor is going to be the bigger plug, and they are labeled. It says Z on it on both of them. The smaller one goes to the in-stop switch. So let's go ahead and plug in the stop and then the motor here. So that's pretty simple. And I believe that's everything that we need to plug in, because everything else is plugged in. Now, one thing that we do need to insert is the PTFE tubing here coming out of the extruder, and that goes into this splitter here. So this does have the Y dual extruder splitter, so it basically goes from 2 tubes to 1 nozzle. And these honestly are a hit or miss. Some of them work great and others are terrible, and they, you know, jam and stuff like that. So we'll see how this printer does, and I hope they got this part figured out. So we're going to insert this one into the one that's pointing closer to itself, which is here on the left side, I guess, if you're looking at it. So that should be good there. And then when we install our second extruder, we're going to plug the PTFE tubing into here. And we'll probably go ahead and install the whole second extruder right away before we power it on and, you know, do all the rest of the stuff, is because, you know, obviously we're going to be using it. So, but before we do that, let's go ahead and adjust a few things, because the hot end assembly here is completely loose and needs to be adjusted. And we need to check all of our rollers everywhere around the printer to make sure everything is good. Also on the bed. And speaking of the bed, let's go ahead and start here. So there's some foam pads underneath. Just pull those out on each side. So we do have some nice large knobs to adjust on. So what we need to do here is we need to check to see if we got any kind of play, and sure enough we do. So it does wobble a bit here and there, so that means our rollers underneath are loose, and sure enough they are. So the good part is that there's only 4 of them, so it should be quite easy to adjust. So we're going to need our open-ended wrench. So it's probably going to be a little hard to see, guys, but there are 4 rollers, 2 on each side. So there's 2 that are non-adjustable, and then 2 that are, and they have the eccentric nut on it. So if we go to the ones that are adjustable, maybe you guys can see it. But the best way to do this is stick your hand in there and spin it. So both of my rollers are loose for sure. So what I'm going to do is get the wrench and then turn the eccentric nut to tighten it up. And what you want to do is tighten it to the point where you can spin the roller and it has friction on the rail. So you don't want to tighten it so hard that you can't spin it. Enough where it doesn't wobble, but not too tight, because if it's too tight, it's just going to eat up the little wheels. So this one is perfect in the back. So let's do the one in the front here. So just a little bit is all I needed, and that looks like all we really need. So let's go ahead and move it back and forth. And you want it to be really smooth. So if you feel any kind of jumpiness or jerkiness, check your rollers, make sure they're not too tight. So yeah, mine are definitely perfect now. I can spin it and there's no wobble whatsoever. Now another thing you want to check is your belt. So the belt here seems to be okay, but it does seem to be a little bit on the edge there. So the way this thing is mounting, it has a bracket, and sometimes you can just bend this back. As you guys can see, it's quite flexible here. So I'm just going to bend it back just a little bit, and sure enough, that centers it up just where it needs to be. So you know, this is already like really fine, I guess, tuning, but yeah, just keep in mind, you know, everything is adjustable. Even bending this just a bit already centers the belt. Now while we're back here, we can go ahead and do these rollers here on the hot end, and you guys can see this thing is completely loose. So on this one on the top, these are stationary, and the one on the bottom is adjustable. So we're going to grab our wrench and we're simply just going to turn it until it grabs. So yeah guys, you just want to adjust this the same way as where you have friction on the rail but no wobbling of any sort, so, or anything funny. It has to be, you know, really solid and smooth. Again, check the smoothness, that it's smooth all the way through and there's no funny jumping or anything weird. And again, check your belts, make sure they're lining up pretty well. So everything looks good on mine. Now we do still have these rollers here on each side of the gantry. So there's 3 on this side and 3 here. And the inner ones are adjustable, so same way. But this time you want to start on this side where the motor and everything is. So we're going to check these. So same thing here guys, you just want some friction but not too much. So these are not as important. Obviously they're still important, but you just don't want any kind of play, especially on this side away from the motor and the lead screw. If you don't have much play and everything seems decently well, it should be good right there. Let's go ahead and install this second extruder for the dual color, or I guess a dual material you could call it, because technically you could use 2 materials. So we got our main cable, which is pretty long, and there's 2 plugs, one for the motor and the other for the filament detector, and they literally plug in on this side of the printer, which is kind of interesting that it's like that, because I think most of the hardware goes on this side on the top. All right, so let's grab the extruder assembly, and we are working with T-nuts. This looks like it's gonna go right here somewhere. Now the reason I say somewhere is because we got another spool holder here that goes here, so we got to make enough room for it. So we can always move it if we don't like where it is later. So yeah, we're just reversing and then tightening, and the T-nut turns and locks into the channel. So same thing for this spool holder. We got a couple T-nuts. So we're going to set it into the channel and do the same thing. All right, and that should be good right there. So let's go ahead and put on the spool part itself. Again, it's going to go towards the back. So our nut's going to go in the front. And that's it. So our spool will go in here, and then the filament will go through the detector and then into the extruder, and then out of the extruder into the Y splitter. So let's grab one of these PTFE tubings and we'll plug it in into the extruder and the other end into the Y. So simple as that. Now we have a dual feed into one nozzle. So the only part left is to plug it in. So our filament detector is right here in the front. And if we flip around, we can see our motor. I'm still a little unsure where the wire should be routing, but we'll figure it out here in a second. We'll go ahead and plug in the motor. So since this is stationary with the frame and it doesn't go up and down, we're probably better off going down some channel here and maybe even go inside the channel to make it look nice and clean. Okay, yeah, so it goes in, so that's good. We can route that. I don't know if you guys can see, but yeah, I'm just pushing it inside into the channel. And that's actually going to give us a really nice clean look here. And we can do this all the way to the bottom. And then from here we can kind of figure out where to route it. And going around doesn't work, so I guess we're gonna have to go here through the top. Now the only thing is we're gonna have to be careful so our wire here doesn't catch on our knobs. In any case, however you get the wire here to the front, but we're gonna need to plug it in right here where it says dual. So there's a smaller plug and a bigger plug. The smaller one is the filament detector and the bigger one is the extruder itself, the motor. So yeah. Now we have the whole dual setup installed and ready to go. So yeah, it looks like everything is good. We got everything adjusted. We checked everything, tightened all the bolts. So I guess we are ready to power it on. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this thing. So on the top here, we can see we have the two spool holders. One of them is the plastic with the logo and the other one's metal. So this is the second one with the same kind of plastic holder. So here we have the second extruder. And what's cool, it is the same kind as we saw earlier, the dual gear extruder, all metal. So I like the overall feeling of this printer. It's very high quality. Now one thing I'm not too crazy about is this one channel here, and we're gonna be putting a lot of weight on the top on a pretty small channel, and maybe that's not too big of a deal, but if you put two 1 kilogram rolls on there, you know, it's a lot of weight on the top. And they didn't include any more bracing, which I thought maybe it would have been nice to have some kind of bracing at least here on the side to keep this thing from being too flexible back and forth. I mean, it is pretty rigid right now, but because the spools are orientated to go this way, all of the stress retraction and pulling on the filament is going to go side to side, which obviously is very strong this way. So going down from there, we can see we got the hot end here, and we'll take a closer look at that. But over here we got the main extruder, we got the filament detector there, and our lead screw going down, which also holds the X-axis motor here in the whole assembly. Now the hot end here is very interesting, as we do have the Y splitter for the dual extruder. So we have quite a bit of fans on them. We got one here, which is a parts cooler, and then another parts cooler on this side. And then here looks like we have the heat break cooler in the middle. Looking underneath, you can see that our heat block is insulated. And also, guys, I didn't notice this, but it looks like this printer does have an auto leveling mechanism. It's like a BL Touch type sensor there. And you guys can see the two openings there for the parts cooling. So quite an interesting shroud that it's all encased in. So over here we have the X-axis end-stop switch. And just below that we got the Z-axis end-stop switch, but it is not a mechanical one, but an optical one looks like. So this piece of metal here goes into this sensor here, and that's what stops it. So looking down on the bed, which we haven't talked about at all, but we have this nice logo, and it's all kind of patterned out or measured out with these numbers here. 210 to 230 to the side here. But the official printing volume is 235 by 235 by 265 tall. But the cool part about this thing, it is a magnetic sheet. So it is a flexible sheet that you can, bend to pop the models off. It is a little bit on the thicker side, so it's not as thin as some other ones, but it does magnetize here to the aluminum plate. And if we look underneath, you guys can maybe see those little white parts of the bed there. Those are actually magnets embedded that make the build material here stick. So the bed is heated, but it is not insulated, as you guys can see. We got really nice large knobs for adjustment. Looks like pretty good springs there. Pretty thick frame on the bottom. For the Y-axis, we have a 40/40 square rail. So that's nice and beefy. The Y belt, it adjusts here on these bolts. So if you do need to adjust it, if it's not centered, mine looks just fine. Our power on and off switch right here on the top, that's quite interesting. The manufacturing sticker, which tells us the model, the wattage, the printing volume here, the voltages, the machine size itself, FDM type, and the weight, which is 7 kilograms, and uses the 1.75 millimeter PLA filament. Going to the front here, you can see that there's nice little caps here on the ends of the channels. We have some auto leveling connection here, our dual extruder connection, which we connected, and our laser module connects into there, which we will try out a little later in the video. Then continuing this way, we got our micro SD slot, which is a little hard to get to be honest. It's right next to the channel here, so not the ideal place to have it. Our USB connection if you want to connect to the computer, and then we got this port here, connection for the display, which is pretty cool that the display is actually removable and you can hold it in your hand. The only thing I don't like about it is that it does have a little bit of a sharp edge on the back, so it's quite uncomfortable to hold, but in any case you can remove it. It looks like there is a screen protector here. Let's go ahead and pull that off. Well, maybe multiple, because there's something else. Okay, there's two of them. All right, going to the right, it's pretty clean here. And to the left, looking at the back of the printer now. So I definitely like the build quality of everything. It definitely feels on the higher end. And I do have to give them credit for this extruder that they're using here, the dual gear all metal, so very nice. So looking here at the back of the heated bed, we got strain relief for the wiring, so that's very nice. And this is our Y-axis in-stop switch and the motor. The Z-axis motor with the coupler. And on the very bottom here on the back, we got the power input, and there's like a little sticker over it. So it is fused, so that's nice. Let's go ahead and pull this off, and as we're pulling it, we can see that we have an opening here, and that is for the voltage selection between the 230 and the 115. So I don't know if you guys can see, but mine is on 230 right now, and that is not the correct voltage, so I need to switch it. And before you plug it in and turn it on, make sure you switch that to the voltage that is correct in the country that you live in. Now I do like how they leave it on 230 instead of the 115, because for us here, if it's left on 230 and we turn it on, it probably just won't work or just do funny things. But if you're in Europe where there's 230 standard and it was on the lower voltage, it could damage the power supply or, you know, scare you with a big pop or something. So yeah, make sure you check your voltages before you power this thing on. All right, so for the next part, let's go ahead and power it on and see what happens. So I got it plugged in the back. Let's hit the power switch. All right, do you hear it? Okay, so it does pull up here on the screen. And there it goes. Looks like it's booted up. And that's kind of cool how I can just grab the whole interface here. It looks like we have the mode on the top. It does say double extruder, so I guess it knows, since we're plugged in, that we have the second extruder there. So it's in that mode. So below that, we got the print button. So once you got that SD card installed, you should be able to read it. And then we got control and settings. Let's click on settings here and see what they got. So we got about, so this is about the printer. The language, so this is all the available languages. And then we got status, so this is the status of the printer right now. And then continue, which there's nothing to continue. So this is power loss resume feature here. All right, so let's go to control. So here we can preheat it, move it, zero it out, extrusion, auto leveling, fan, stop everything. And then we have some settings for the sound. Okay, so we can turn it on, and whenever we click anything here, we can hear clicking. All right, so let's go to move and click on home. I'm guessing that's the middle one there, and see, make sure all of our axes work. So I'm going to click the middle there, and it looks like X, Y, and then Z going down. All right. On the bottom here, we have extruder 1 and extruder 2. If we click on it, we can choose between the two. So for the next part, let's go to preheat. So we have options here for PLA, ABS, and then we can go up and down on temperature manually if we want with these settings here, and we have a stop for everything. So let's click on PLA and automatically preheat the nozzle there. And if we click on the here, we can see it goes to the second nozzle, which obviously we don't have a second nozzle. And then the bed itself. And here we can manually set it to what we want. So let's just go to, I guess, 60 to start off with. All right, so the nozzle's at 200 and the bed is at 37. So yeah, heating up pretty quick. So yeah, it seems like everything is working. So that's great. So as that's preheating, we should go ahead and go to the bed leveling. So let's click on it. So here we have some options. We can have an offset, which is at 0 right now, and then auto bed leveling, manual leveling, and then plus and minus. So that's for the offset. So what you want to do in the beginning before you do auto bed leveling is you want to manually level the bed. So I'm going to click on M, and it gives me 5 boxes of 4 of the corners in the center. So let's start with corner number 1 here, and it goes straight to there. Now you remember you want to have your bed preheated so it's nice and hot. So I'm just going to use a Post-it note. Right off the bat, I can see that we're definitely too high on it. So we're going to adjust the knob here on the bottom to get close. And so we just want a slight drag between the nozzle and the bed. So let's go to corner 2. Same thing here. Here we're too loose, so we're going to go up a bit. So yeah, once it's close, we're going to go to the next one. So we are manually adjusting it, but you know, we do have assistance from the software here that brings us to each corner. So yeah, this is our first pass. Let's go around one more time. And the reason I want to do that is because you want to get it pretty close. And now we'll go to the middle and see what that looks like. And that's actually pretty good. All right, so now that we did the manual bed leveling, we can go ahead and go back and do the auto leveling. So let's click on that. Let's see what it does. So you guys can see it's using the little pin to measure the bed. So it's taking measurements throughout the whole bed, and then it's gonna, you know, auto adjust it as it prints. All right, so now it went to the center and it's letting us do the offset. So we're gonna grab our little paper here and we're gonna either go up or down. So it looks like I need to go down, so I'm gonna click on minus, I think. Let's see. Nope, that's incorrect. I need to click on the plus. So that makes it go down. So I'm just gonna keep clicking it, the plus, until, okay, yeah, I'm too tight now, so I'm gonna back off just a bit. And I am on the 0.01 setting. And that actually feels about right. Maybe a little less. So yeah, so my offset is going to be 0.4 from where it was. So yeah, now we should be finished with the leveling process. So for the next part, let's install some filament. So let's bring this whole Z-axis up a bit. So we're going to use this side of the spool holder. And so our filament is going to go out this way and then down into the filament detector and then through the extruder here. You guys probably can't see that. But yeah, I'm just pushing it through the extruder here by releasing the arm, and maybe you can see the filament inside the PTFE tubing, the green filament. And I'm going to go ahead and push it all the way down into the hot end, and we should start purging out. And you guys can see it's kind of coming out, but we can go here and click on extrusion. Then we have nozzle 1 and 2. I think we need 1 here, and then we can choose how much we want. Let's say 10 millimeters. So I'm going to click on load, and it's going to push out that much. So and you guys can see, push it some more. It's going to purge it out. I mean, it's simple enough just to push it by hand technically. Yeah, looks like we're ready to go, guys. We got everything leveled, the filament loaded. So let's grab our little micro SD card and we'll plug it into the port. And it looks like it does go upside down. We'll click on print and see if we can find something to print here. So we got quite a few folders in here. Let's click on this model folder. Monochrome, I think, is what we need. So we have a lucky cat, a dog, and a crocodile. I guess let's do, since we got green, the crocodile. Confirm. Okay, so here we go. We're starting up. And it does appear that we are a pretty good distance off the bed, from what I can tell. All right. It is going a little bit quick for the first layer, but the distance seems to be good. All right, well, yeah, it doesn't seem to be any kind of issues. Not that I can tell. It is going a little too quick on the first layer, but that's okay, I guess. It seems to be all sticking. So let's see what we got here on the controller. So we got the file on the top, percentage that it's done, which is 0 for now. The time that it took since started, 2 minutes. The bed temperature, the nozzle temperature, the second nozzle, which obviously we don't have. That looks like the speed, 100%. And then the Z-axis is at 0.3 millimeters right now from the bottom where it started. And then we got control, stop, and pause. So we can pause the print. We can completely cancel it by clicking stop here. Control, so let's click on that. So it looks like we can do temperature, fan, speed, and extrusion. And we also get all these parameters here if we want to, look at this. So let's see here, speed, we can go down to 80%, and that will slow it down probably. Go back, change that to 100. Yeah, looks like we got pretty good controls, but yeah, guys, if you hear some kind of cracking here, something's happening inside the hot end. Okay, seems like to go away. There's something seems to be either vibrating or maybe the fan is catching on something. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but okay, so it has to do something with these wires. When I touch them a bit, it seems to stop. So there must be a wire somewhere in there that's touching the fan maybe. The only thing I can think of. Okay, well, we're gonna have to print through this one, I guess, with the noise that it has, and then I'll check it out once we're done with our first print. All right, so our alligator is already at 4%, so it's boogieing along. I think it'll be finished here pretty quick. And we'll see what that looks like. And actually the buzzing went away completely, which is really odd. I'm gonna let you guys hear it. Super quiet printer. I definitely like that about it. All right, so yeah, everything looks good. I'm just gonna let it print out. I'm pretty excited to see what our first print will look like. Alright guys, so our little alligator is done and everything turned out pretty good, looks like, except for one of his feet pulled up, but it was going a little too fast there in the beginning, in my opinion. So yeah, our display says here that it's done, and it took, actually says 1 hour and 1 minute, so pretty quick. Confirm that. So let's go ahead and see how well this plate works. And as I was trying to pull it up, the alligator just popped right off. So yeah, that didn't take much effort there. Guess we'll put this back. So looking at the bottom of it, it does appear that we're pretty good, but I think we need to get a little closer to the build plate. I think that'll help. Part of the reason probably one of the feet here came off maybe. But if we look at the print itself and the way the layers are sitting, yeah, that's pretty impressive actually. So everything looks very smooth and uniform. So yeah, very good start here on our first print with this alligator. Now, since we are in dual color mode right now, I think we should go ahead and put this other spool into the second extruder. And we got this pretty nice orange color. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to controls and preheat the nozzle and go ahead and preheat the bed also. So we're gonna do the same thing here on this other extruder. Release the arm and push our filament through. So I'm just gonna manually push it all the way down until it gets right over here. And I'm not gonna go deeper in there because I don't wanna jam anything. So let's go ahead and go to print and see if we can find a dual print model in here. So we got bicolor G code, and there are two of them. There's a dragon and traffic warning. I'm not sure what those are, so I guess let's go with the traffic warning. Confirm. So we started that, and this should be a dual color print here. Now remember, we are using just one nozzle for both of the extruders. So it looks like it just purged there a bunch. And there it goes. It is printing a round circle there, so I don't know if this is part of the purge, but I think the way the dual color works, at least in this configuration, is that it's going to have to make some kind of purge block on the side. So this would be quite interesting to see what kind of print we get. So whatever this traffic warning post is, I guess we'll see. Once it gets a little farther down into the print, I'll show you guys how it changes color. So it's changing color right now. You guys can see or not, but it pushed out the green. And now pushing in the orange. And then purging, which is where it's at right now. So it's building like a separate wall there, or purge wall block. And then the print is to the left where it's going right now, and I guess this is a traffic cone is what it is. So yeah, it appears to be doing just fine, switching between the two colors. So I'm just going to let it print out, and we'll see what comes out of it. Alright, so our first color print is done, and it actually took 2 hours and 54 minutes, so right at 3 hours. Now that's not too bad. And we can see here we got the purge block, the extra filament that it needed to change between the two colors. So let's see this time if we can maybe pull it off without it breaking loose itself. Alright. And also, if you guys can see, maybe around the cone, there's like another layer here around it. That's actually to keep it from blobbing. There's little blobs on it. Maybe you guys can see. Anyways, let's see if we can flex it. Okay, so yeah, it seems to be cutting loose pretty easily. Okay, so the cone is off, and the purge block also came off pretty good. Had a pretty large brim here, but yeah, everything comes off really easy off of this build plate. So yeah, so far so good with this thing. So this outer layer should just come right off, and sure enough it does. And this is what our model looks like, and the color separation looks pretty much perfect, I would say. Very nice. So yeah, except for this blob here that happened. I'm not sure what was going on there. That was on the first layer. I think what happened was you got to start the filament right at the tips here, but the green was already all the way down through, and I think that made it blob out. So I would say so far this printer is doing very well. I definitely like how the layers are going down. So I think I'm going to go ahead and print more of the samples that are included in here. And I'm also going to change up the filament to get different colors, and we'll see how those turn out. All right, so I printed quite a few models that came with the printer, and also I sliced a few of my own. And before we take a look at those, let's try out the laser attachment that the printer comes with. So first we're gonna power it off. And I haven't looked at the instructions, but let's see how intuitive it is. Now, first thing we gotta do is we gotta remove the hot end assembly. That's very simple. There's just these 2 bolts. And the whole thing just comes right off. Yeah, that was very simple, just 2 bolts. And I'm guessing we're just gonna need to set this to the side somewhere. Maybe if we disconnect the PTF tubing on the second extruder, we should just be able to put this down right down there and be out of the way. So let's go ahead and grab our laser module. So this should be a pretty simple process here. So the laser should line up. There's these 3 bolts here and they fall into these 3 holes, and it literally just goes right over. And then we use the same bolts to tighten up the whole module here to the bracket. So this literally takes less than a minute to do, which is pretty cool to be able to swap to this function. Now, I'm not sure where the wire should be going. It is routed out here to this side. Now, I don't think it needs to move up and down, so we're not too worried about that. So we'll leave the wire coming out to the front like this, and we'll see how that works out. So our module plugs in right here where it says laser. It's right here next to the dual wires. Now, I don't know if we need to unplug these dual wires. I'm just gonna leave them plugged for now. And if we see on the brains of the laser here, this box, we do have a T-nut that does appear to go into this channel here underneath. So there's some pins that we're gonna just plug in into the printer to the base. This might be a little hard to see, but yeah, literally just plugs right in. And then we're gonna need to flip this on its side so you guys can see maybe. But here we can see the T-nut and it lines up with the rail underneath. We're just gonna unscrew the bolt, let the T-nut turn, and then tighten it back up, and that's it. So now it's secured underneath here on the Y-axis channel. All right, so I think we installed everything. Let's go ahead and try to power it on and see what happens. Let's see if our intuition is correct, and it should just work. And sure enough, since we plugged in the laser, it knows that we got the laser plugged in. Super cool. And this is what I was hoping for, is a very intuitive and user-friendly experience. And this is what we're getting, so that's a good sign. So here we have the print button again, the control button. So here under controls, we can see it's a little different. It says a laser move on it. So this has to do with the laser. And then settings, pretty generic stuff. I think the same what we saw. So everything's gonna be under control here. So let's go ahead and I guess move it up a bit. Okay, so it moves up. So let's move the build plate out of the way just in case we accidentally turn this thing on. But there's a button here. I wonder what this does. Let's click on it. Okay, so sure enough, that is the laser. All right, so we know our laser works, so that's good. So there's a button here in the middle, and I wonder what that does. Let's go ahead and push that. Okay, so that looks like it homes it. Okay, so that is the home. And if you guys maybe can see, it is using the end stop switch that is on the end of the laser to home itself. All right, well, simple enough. And we do have, looks like some kind of save button next to that. But before we do anything else, let me raise this thing again. I think for the next part, we need to use one of these samples and put them here right on the build plate, and it's just as big as the build plate. And the 4 little clamps that the laser came with, it looks like 2 extra bolts to mount it, are good for mounting this plank here onto the bed. Now you can't take out the flexible build plate from the printer and just use it on top of the aluminum, looks like. So either way, it'll work. I just kept it on there. So technically right now we are ready to start the lasering process. All right, so let's go ahead and home it again with the middle button. I wonder if my clip's gonna be in the way. It looks like it is actually. Is it? Yeah, it is. I'm just gonna clip it right in front of it. Okay, so the one thing I'm wondering is, can we adjust the laser itself, or is it already pre-adjusted? Well, let's go ahead and hit the save button over here. I think that's what that is. I think that's what it was, so I just confirmed it. I guess I was hoping that there was some kind of adjustment for the laser pattern to adjust the intensity of it, or the focus beam, I guess what I'm trying to say. But let's just go with what we got here, and we'll go back and click on print, and we should have a folder in here called model and then laser G code. So it looks like we have a few of them. We got tiger, shark, horse. So I guess let's start with the first one, which is tiger. I'll click on it, confirm, and let's see what happens. Okay, yeah, all right, so it looks like this is not the correct way to do it. We can't adjust the Z height as it's printing, so that's nice. Okay, let's just stop that. Okay, so I think this is the problem when you don't read directions, but I think what needs to happen, let's go ahead and reset that back to home. So I think the idea is that we need to figure out how high it needs to be off of our sheet that we're engraving into. That way we can get the right intensity. And by the way, I did forget to mention we need to wear our glasses here while we're using the laser so we don't ruin our eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and put them on. So yeah, the way this works is that you're gonna, set your distance between what you're engraving and the laser. Then you're gonna click the save button to save that position for as the focal point. Now you do have a little ring here that you can spin on the bottom to also adjust the focal length. But I don't recommend playing with that unless you know what you're doing. And it is supposed to be preset with the factory. And I think I messed it up by clicking on these buttons and then clicking the save button. So kind of made it go off where it was supposed to be. So yeah, it should be preset, but if you do need to adjust it, you will have to manually, set it and then save it, and that should work. So I think I saved mine. Let's go ahead and try to print something here. See if I put it back where it's supposed to be. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, that's definitely not correct. So let's move it up. All right, well, I definitely screwed up the offset of the laser. So, all right, so it looks like I'm gonna have to play around with it and get the beam just right. And then I'll start it again and we'll see how it burns, because at this point it's not doing anything. So as you guys can see, the laser is running and it is not doing anything. So I am not sure exactly what's going on, if it's just user error or I'm not understanding with the focusing. But I mean, I've focused quite a few lasers before. It's a pretty simple process. You just make the bead as small as possible. It seems like to me that it is in just the low power state right now instead of the burning power, and it just doesn't have enough energy to burn into the wood. So if I pause it and let it sit in one spot, obviously it will burn through pretty quick, but as it's moving, it's not enough. So I'm not too sure exactly what's going on here, but it's not working for me, and I've tried everything, and for the life of me, I cannot figure it out. So I guess we're going to have to skip this part, but in any case, it is operational and quite intuitive and easy to use on the UI. Now, another issue that I have with this whole setup is that the software that comes with it is only for Windows, but I am on Mac. I've used my Cura profile to do all my printing, including the dual color. But one thing I did figure out, if we go up here higher, we can see there's a bolt here, and actually the hot end, I guess temporarily can mount. Let's go ahead and try that out. So it probably mounts upside down, believe it or not, because the wires have to be long enough to reach it. So in any case, you can mount it out of the way while you're using the laser, and there's another bolt you can use, but it seems like one is plenty. And technically you could just leave the tubes in it, and yeah, so once you're done with the laser, just pull that one bolt off and put the hot end back on. So yeah, that was a little disappointing here, and I'm not gonna rule out that this part of it doesn't work or whatever. It's just probably my user error here. And if I flip this around, you guys can see how much I played around with it trying to focus it, and I realized that my focus was great. It's just the power output on the laser is not strong enough to actually burn into the material. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the models that we did print. All right, so here are all the prints that we printed that came with the printer. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off because we got a bunch of fans running, including the laser fan. So these we didn't slice, they came with the printer. So, sometimes these are great and sometimes not so great. These actually are really nice. So we looked at this alligator thing. Let's go ahead and look at the lucky cat. So the thing I noticed, that the strong point of this printer is in single color printing. It is excellent print quality with the layers, very uniform. And you guys can see on this cat how nice the layers are sitting. So now, one thing I did notice that was a drawback somewhat is the cooling. So whenever there's overhangs, tend to droop a bit here and there. So we'll see that through the other prints. But the impressive part is the layer bonding and how they all sit together. So I don't know the settings on it, but it turned out great. The little dog here also turned out beautiful. Now, I did use my own filament for this. It's a like silky blue of some sort. And you guys can see how well that is printed with all the layers. Very nicely layered together. So yeah, and also the bed material has worked extremely well, and all of the prints stuck, and I was able to just flex them off with no issue. So I do like the build material that they're using here. Now, for the last print that we printed was this dragging thingamajigger, I guess, with some eggs here, and you guys can see that turned out very well, and the color separation between the two colors is excellent. So this is the dual color print. Now, with the dual color print, we get just as good print quality as the single layer, seems like, overall. So yeah, very nice. The only thing I've noticed with the dual color, there's a little bit more layering. So, and I think because it has to do with color changing, going back and forth, but it's very minor and not very noticeable, and color prints just look awesome. And also, this is the purge block for the dragging there with the eggs, and you guys can see how much material is wasted when you do dual color. And you have to purge between the two colors so you can bleed out the old color and then start the new one. And this is why the purge block is made. Now the dragon was actually not the last print that we made. There was actually still this cone, and that's the purge block with it. So this is, you know, a little simpler kind of dual color because it's just a continuous change. You could actually do this yourself, meaning stop the print, change the color, and keep printing, and then, you know, stop it again, change the color. So this is all nice and everything, and the way these prints came out, but because these came with the printer, it's kind of hard to see what the printer actually will print like once you slice your own files. And so these are all the prints that I've sliced and printed out. So I mostly did dual color because obviously this is the highlight of this printer, not including the laser, of course, but I also printed a couple benchmarks so we can look at that. And yeah, overall I was quite impressed and really enjoyed using this printer. So let's start with this Rook here, and I'll go ahead and show you the purge block. So this is when I first started slicing and I didn't really know how much to purge, and obviously you guys can see that was not even close to enough. And because I was using a darker and lighter color, black and gray here, you can see how some of the black got bled into the gray. Not perfect, but still looks pretty decent and still turned out well. Now you can see a little bit more layering with the dual color prints, and that's going to be pretty consistent with all the prints. But they're all printed in 0.2 layer height with 15 millimeters a second, 200 on a nozzle, 60 on the bed. So pretty standard stuff here. So yeah, this is the Rook and turned out pretty well. So I decided to print the Earth. So we got blue and green, and on this thing you can really see the layering. So it seems to tend to happen whenever it's doing the dual color. Here's the purge block here. You can see we have a lot more material, and the color separation was perfect. We don't have any bleeding between the green and the blue. So yeah, this little Earth here turned out pretty nice. So here we have a print that's actually functional, and this is a gear, and I used the black and gray, and so it is in dual color as you can see, and this is the purge block here. And so what's pretty cool about this is when I pulled it off, it literally broke loose and started spinning. Pretty incredible, especially being a dual color print. Yeah, the printer seems to have very good precision. So the next print we have here is also in dual color, blue and silver. This is a Squirtle, I guess. And this thing turned out really nice. I really like how this thing looks, and the separation color was perfect. Even though I didn't do a great job on the purge block, you can see it's quite thin and not so much purging, but the separation and the color still worked out perfect, and it looks great. So again, you can see a little sagging here, and that's the cooling, and a little bit under here. So if there's anything negative to say about it, the cooling is a little weak on the printer. So overhangs do sag a bit. So here we have our last color print, and this is the Astronaut. Good purge there, and quite heavy. So we did use up quite a bit of material. But as you guys can see, the Astronaut looks awesome. So we got yellow on the suit, and then we actually had a rainbow filament, and it kind of started out this, I guess, rose pink and turned to blue eventually. So yeah, it looks pretty cool, and I definitely like the transition because it was pretty much perfect. So again, you can see the layering somewhat a little bit here and there. It's not bad, but it is there. But as far as the colors and the separation between them is just amazing. So this is one of the better dual color printing I've seen for sure. And again, here you can see under his fingers the poor cooling that's kind of causing them to droop a bit. This part on the top here is very hard to get right, and this printer did an excellent job. And so for our benchmark prints, we got a Benchy and a Calibration Cube, guys. And let's look at the Calibration Cube here. You guys can see the x-axis, so pretty light vibrations and a little bit of ghosting, but not bad. The y-axis, also some light vibrations and a little bit of ghosting, not bad though. The X wall and the Y wall, so that's the top and the bottom. So let's go ahead and measure them for accuracy. So first we'll do the X, a little bit under, but not bad, 0.1. And then the Y, pretty close also to the X. The Z, but overall the cube is very nice, and the layers are sitting really cleanly together. So let's look at the Benchy next. So the Benchy looks really good, and this really shows how well the layers go down here, guys. So yeah, very impressive. The strong point of this printer is definitely single color printing. We do have a little bit of vibrations there, or ringing, not terrible. The seam here. So looking at the side walls, also pretty good. Cooling is decent. Hangovers are decent also. If you look at the box down there, it does have a slit in it. So yeah, the only issue with the Benchy, and if you look on the top, is the chimney melted a bit. So I'm not sure what that's all about. Either we don't have enough cooling, or maybe we're too hot, even though we are printing all the prints at 200. So this is all, even these prints here, is a 0.2 layer height at 15 millimeters a second. Alright guys, so this is the Lotmaxx SC-10 Shark. So overall I think it's a great printer. I love the way it looks. The darker and lighter grays are definitely one of my favorite colors, and it's very pleasant to look at. The build quality on everything is excellent. I love how they built out the whole bottom here with the covers. The main tethered control here with a large touchscreen, very nice. The removable build surface sheet is nice. You can flex it, pop the prints off. The dual printing Y bracket head works great, better than expected. Love the extruders, they're all metal, very nice. Silent stepper drivers, so very quiet. And also capable of 3 functions with single extrusion printing, dual extrusion, or the laser. Now to me, the laser seems to be a little bit of a novelty. And while it's nice to have, unless you think you're going to be using it, it's probably not worth it. But that's just from my experience. If you're the kind of person that likes everything in one package, this does work out really nice. So with that said, I think this printer would be very good for somebody that's wanting a machine that can do multiple things, especially the dual extruder printing. And also the assembly of this, as you saw guys, was quite simple. So unfortunately there's no easy way to just switch between the modes, which I wish was implemented in here, unless I didn't notice how to use that. But let's say we're on the laser right now, so we will have to unplug that before we can go back to color printing. And that makes sense, but it's just an extra hassle of taking things on and off. So keep that in mind also. And this printer here also came with the out of bed leveling, which was really nice because we set the base first and then it out of bed leveled. And so that part is nice, and you can offset the Z axes up and down, and that makes it quite simple and very easy as far as bed leveling goes. And a lot of people, especially that get started with 3D printing, have that issue, and this printer makes it really easy. In any case guys, if you are interested in this printer, I'm going to have some links in the description. Check it out. If you did enjoy this video, then hit that like button. And if you are interested in videos like this, I do have a pretty extensive playlist with all the 3D printing reviews I've done. You'll probably find something interesting there, so check that out. And also there are more 3D printing videos coming up, so stay tuned. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.